All right, party people, we are back with another event to cover. Thank you for the 2 weeks off. I am now moved and I am in my own place for the very first time, alone and scared here downtown. But anyway, we have a face to face 1K event to cover. So here we go. And yeah, hopefully you guys have checked out the first 1K event that happened earlier in January. I will put up a title card that will link straight to that playlist. So here we have player one side, we have Troy. I'm pretty sure he is on Sultai Beans. And then we have our round one magnet, Elliot Ritter, on player two side. This time he is playing mono black mid range, mono black aggro. I would consider it more of a mid range list, but he consider it's hard to tell. It's weird grouping decks and legacy in this way. I guess from a traditional standpoint, it is kind of like an aggro strategy. He's looking to. It's not really a tempo plan, but he is playing a lot of efficient disruptive creatures while also disrupting his opponent and just beating down, trying to get in as much damage every turn as possible. That's his game plan, and we're all hopefully familiar with Sultai Beans. Deck is pretty much probably considered one of the best decks in the format, if not the best deck, then the best archetype. But we are going to start the race here. So Troy playing first, slamming down an island and passing the turn. Elliot gonna drop down a swamp, and he has a choice of Thoughtseize or Grief Reanimate here. All right, so he's gonna opt for the Grief. Looks like he's gonna pitch a Dismember. Sees the island, so kind of values the Dismember a little less. Troy going to Brainstorm in response. You draw Brainstorm, Wasteland, and I think that Yu-Gi-Oh card is a Daze or Force of Will. Wait, does Beans even play Daze? Okay, it's probably a Force of Will. Oh god, do I love Invocation so much. Alright, Troy going to put two on top. He's going to reveal the hand. So resolving the grief. There's a Murder's Cut, Brainstorm, Tropical Island, Wasteland, and I can't read hieroglyphs. I guess I can search them really quickly and find out and try to determine by the picture. Looks like he takes the counter spell. I think no matter what, it's gonna be a counter spell. I highly doubt that it's Stifle because we've seen Stifle on this channel before. Okay, so it's not Force of Will. So that means it's yes, confirmed it is Daze. So Elliot gonna reanimate the grief and take the brainstorm. Troy going to draw for his turn. Down comes a Tropical Island. Just passes back to Elliot. Elliot gonna draw for his turn. Top decks a Dothy Voidwalker. Puts down a Prismatic Vista. Probably gonna go search for just a regular swamp here. So Elliot's really nicely positioned here against this, or at least in this matchup, because I think what Sultai Beans can really do that pushes itself ahead of the other up the beanstalk variants is that it can wasteland and it can light from the loam. And since Elliot is just playing mono black swamps, that strategy is kind of not very beneficial here. So Troy is going to play a wasteland and pass the turn. Elliot got quite a bit of power on board here at 6. You can slam down another Dothy Voidwalker as well and just keep the pressure up. I'm not sure if he has a land because he also has an opposition in hand that he can, or opposition agent in hand that he can kind of stall out here. But it looks like he's just gonna Thoughtseize instead and keep the control player kind of on the back foot. Looking down a ton of removal in Murder's Cut, Fatal Push, and Shieldred's Edict. I don't think you're too worried about the Murder's Cut for now. It's a lot of resources, but he can hardcast it. Looks like Elliot's going to opt for the Shieldred's Edict. It's going to get exiled with a Void counter, allowing Elliot to cast it himself. But going to swing in for 6 instead, dropping Troy down to 11. Elliot at 13 because of the Thoughtseize. Troy gonna draw for his turn. I think it's another Wasteland. Nope, it's a Polluted Delta. Sorry, my mistake. So Troy playing with the 2 removal spells in his hand. He can use the Fatal Push to kind of get rid of this Dothy Voidwalker, and then he can Murderous Cut the Grief, but then it would leave him handless with Elliot 3 cards in hand. So Elliot is in a really, really good position here. This looks like a Murderous Cut. Looks like he's gonna tap out, exile the Polluted Delta, and go after the most likely the Grief, because the Fatal Push can finish off the Dothy Voidwalker. Oh no, sorry, the Polluted Delta is exiled under the Voidwalker, so it's not a Murderous Cut. I'm a little rusty here. There's a push from the Grief because it is revolted from the Polluted Delta. Elliot checking the Dothy Voidwalker. Alright, so are we going to find a land from Elliot? There's a 1 ring. So his hand is currently Dothy Voidwalker, 1 ring, Sudden Edict, Opposition Agent. Down comes another Dothy Voidwalker from Elliot. Elliot gonna swing in for 3. No need to play this extra land from the Dothy Voidwalker. I think he can just sit comfortably with his 3/2 beaters. He is threatening lethal within 2 turns. So here comes a Fatal Push. No, wait, we use the Fatal Push. What did he draw? Is he fully tapping out for the Murderous Cut? Looks like he is. Murderous Cut on the untapped Dothy Voidwalker. And going to pass the turn. I think it's a Misty Rainforest in hand. There it is. Elliot untaps, draws return. Is it a land? It is a Wasteland, so now he can cast his Opposition Agent nice and freely. Comes in for 3, bringing Troy down to 4. Oh, gonna pass the turn. Okay, so in response to the fetch, there is an Opposition Agent. And it looks like Troy is packing it up, so that is game 1 to Elliot on Mono Black. Alrighty, here we are for game number 2. Elliot up 1 game over Troy, playing Mono Black Aggro versus Sultai Beans. Troy will be on the play. Troy is going to mulligan here. Elliot looking at Reanimate Grief. I think it's Reanimate Grief, Dark Ritual, Thoughtseize, Opposition Agent, Prismatic Vista, and a Swamp. So not a bad opener here. You can do the same thing he did last turn. Or last game. He has actually quite a variety of options. He can exile the Thoughtseize, play the Grief, reanimate the Grief to take 2 cards out of the hand and still Dark Ritual into Opposition Agent. Or he can pitch the Dark Ritual and just play Thoughtseize on turn 2 to strip away anything else that's dangerous and just try to draw into a 3rd land. There's a 3rd land. Looks like a Lord of the Rings box topper. I'm not sure exactly which one it is. But going to play a Prismatic Vista in response to Troy's Misty Rainforest. And then he's going to Grief. Looks like he's considering pitching the Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is going to resolve. Troy going to reveal Polluted Delta, Wasteland. Looks like those are 2 more Dazes, an Orcish Bowmaster. Alright, so Elliot going to take a Daze. Now he's kind of a little worried about casting this Reanimate here because he can't be dazed. So Elliot going to crack the Prismatic Vista. Elliot and Troy going to respond. I think doing the same thing. Grabs an Underground Sea. I wonder if Elliot's trying to get Troy to use his Daze. But the problem is he'll trade 2 cards for the 1 Daze. And he sets Elliot back, or sorry, he sets Troy back 1 turn. But that doesn't really accomplish anything because you have to use a Dark Ritual to get Troy to actually do anything. I guess you can reanimate, but I wouldn't give up a reanimate for this Daze. I think you could have reliably just passed the turn and then played a land and then tried to Dark Ritual into Opposition Agent next turn. Looks like Troy's gonna fall for the bait. Now Elliot I mean, it's a kind of weird situation. I would have preferred to wait. You give... Oh, there's a wasteland. You give Troy one more turn, but your plays are a little bit more safe, and it's not that hard to play around a daze. So the play for the turn is going to be Elliot stripping away the land with a wasteland. Gonna pass it back to Troy. Troy gonna play a polluted delta. It looks like he's gonna pass it back to Elliot. Elliot gonna draw an opposition agent for his turn. There's a second swamp. And pass back to Troy. Troy gonna draw. Play a wasteland of his own. Not gonna do much here. Looks like he's passing. Elliot draws a Thoughtseize. So this is a nice way to check if the coast is clear. You're gonna play a land. It looks like the bar underneath it is a single word. Looks pretty holy, so I'm gonna assume that it's a Caracas. It's like the only notable land from Lord of the Rings box toppers other than like Ancient Tomb that I can think of. But Elliot gonna try to resolve a Thoughtseize here. Troy in the tank on whether or not it resolves. It is going to resolve. So we get to take a look. That looks like a Spell Pierce, Orcish Bowmasters that we know about, a Murktide Regent, and I think it's a Sheoldred's Edict. Okay, Elliot taking the Murktide Regent. Like, Spell Pierce would accelerate in a matchup where your Wastelands can actually do something. Because you can then operate on a low land count, but you're also keeping your opponent's resources low as well. So Spell Pierce is actually exceptional in those kinds of situations, but because your Wastelands can't really do anything, and Elliot goes on like a huge, like long, like drawn out game of just drawing lands, the Spell Pierce just becomes dead in your hand. I wonder if there's just nothing better that Elliot could bring in. Elliot gonna try, or sorry, Troy going to try and crack a fetch here. There's a polluted, or cracking the polluted delta. Elliot gonna try to Dark Ritual in response to the fetch. Looks like it'll resolve, and down comes the opposition agent. So opposition agent resolves. There's a Sheoldred's Edict going to make Elliot sacrifice a creature. Elliot gonna tap 3 mana. Is there a second one? There's a second opposition agent. Alright, Sheoldred's Edict gonna resolve. And now we're resolving the fetch. So, yes, opposition agent does say you control your opponent while they are searching. So, because you control them, you also get to see their hand. So, we're going to see Spell Pierce, Misty Rainforest, Orcish Bowmaster. Elliot going to search for either a swamp or an island. So, that Underground Sea is exiled, and he can play it? I think he can play it for as long as it's exiled. I don't think the opposition agent needs to be there. What a broken card. Alright, Elliot gonna draw for turn. There is a Reanimate. Nothing but gas. Here is a Reanimate. Most likely gonna target the grave. Just to note, everyone, when you are reanimating, you must select your target before your opponent tries to do anything. So the grief is gonna come into play. It's gonna take the Orcish Bowmaster. Spell Pierce really does nothing. Elliot not really caring because he has all the mana he wants to pay for the Spell Pierce tax. Troy going to draw for his turn. Going to pass back to Elliot. Elliot going to untap. There's a Dothy Voidwalker. Nothing but 3/2s. Slam down the Dothy Voidwalker. Going to attack for 3. Going to be weary of an Orcish Bowmaster that can be flashed in. There's a Tropical Island top decked from Troy. Looks like he top decked a Stifle the last turn. Down comes the Tropical Island that he drew for the turn. Wasteland is going to go after the land that I think is a Caracas. Gonna draw, and it is a Troll of Cause of Doom. I think we can just He is going to Swamp Cycle. I think it's safe to say that you can just swing with the Grief and the Voidwalker. I mean, if you want to be like very, very safe, then you can just attack with the Voidwalker if you're afraid of getting double blocked by the Grief. We're going to come in for 6 and give Troy one more turn to draw out of this. Alright, top deck's a Polluted Delta, and Elliot takes it over Troy, 2-0. Alrighty, folks, we will see you for the next one.